Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to another Wednesday evening with the Clear Mountain community. You'll see we are very, very blessed again to have our friend Jin Chuan Shi. So, Dharma Master, thank you for coming again.
Happy to be here.
And so this is our second interview with Jin Chuan Shi. So we won't read his biography again. It is in the show notes if you want to read a bit more about his past. You can also watch that other video, and we'll link to that. But in our previous video, we heard a bit about Jin Chuan Shi's path into the robes, and I thought maybe just to continue there. Coming once you had maybe gotten permission from your mom, I'm curious what was the path forward from that to ordain.
So maybe going back, did I share the story about my mom letting me leave home already, about the kind of advice Reverend Shi gave me?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay,
actually.
so there's a couple, I think, really important pieces to the story that for those maybe who have monastic aspirations, I wish I had known before I tried to become a monk through my own kind of idealizations of how to do it. And so one of them was, I was really gung-ho, want to be a monk. And so basically I try to be a monk as much as possible as a young man, in college. I get up really early and then try to meditate a lot and quote unquote be a monk in college. And at one point I went to Reverend Hong Shi, who is a senior monk at Berkeley Buddhist Monastery.
Were you keeping the 8 precepts?
I wasn't keeping it super strictly, but I was eating very little.
Okay.
I had it in my mind I was supposed to eat very little and sleep very little and practice all the time.
Okay.
Because we're supposed to, get free of samsara. And I had in my mind, if I wasn't putting my full effort forth all the time, I was somehow being inauthentic to my actual vows. And so I had to really push myself all the time. And in some way I got very concentrated, but I also got very tight.
Okay.
But I remember coming to Reverend Hong Shi and asking him, essentially, what should I do with my life? With the wish of kind of wanting to be a monk. And I was really surprised what he told me. He said to me, you need to listen to your mom more. And I thought, what? My mom doesn't want me to be a monk. How does that work? He said, you need to listen to your mom more. Your mom is very strong. And I said, okay. And so I went back, to my dorm in college, and I was kind of reflecting on what Reverend Hong Shi said. And I really respect him because, he was kind of like my role model monk, somebody who really inspired me. And I thought, so I have to kind of take his words seriously. And what does that mean? My mom doesn't want me to be a monk. And, she gets really upset whenever even the thought of it comes up. And what do I do? And so in our community, we have a booklet called Standards for Students. And it's taught to all the kind of K through 12 students. We have a boys and girls school here at 16,000 Buddhas. And it basically goes over how you're supposed to be a child in the family, and how you're supposed to be a student, how you're supposed to be a friend. And so I said, okay, maybe I'll take a look at this.
Is that a Confucian?
It's like a Confucian text. Okay. I definitely consider a Confucian text. So I picked it up, and they're all in short verses. And the first verse was something like, when your parents call, immediately respond. I said, wow, that's, not easy. Because usually, if I'm at home, my mom calls me and do something on the computer. I say dinner time, and I'll say, okay, mom, coming. And then 5 minutes later, she says, dinner time. I said, okay, I'm coming. I'm just about to finish something. And then she's stomping in to get me. Boom, boom, boom. She's time for dinner. My name is David. David, come out. And I'm like, mom, no problems. Coming already. Gosh, don't people always nagging me, And I thought, okay, so whenever she calls me, immediately respond. So she says, David, dinner time. I drop what I'm doing. I go out for dinner.
Okay.
And what I found was it really changed our relationship. Number one, there was no more nagging, because if I just do whatever she says immediately, there's no kind of follow-up, which is kind of trying to be on my case, which is actually, I realized, a lot of freedom. And then I realized, why don't I actually go and help out? You know, let's say before dinner, I go maybe 15 minutes early and like wash the dishes or something, you know, and just be part of the family. And what I realized is by doing that, I kind of was less thinking about myself and actually caring for the family. And that, I think, had a profound influence on how I showed up, and actually my parents trusting that this path is a good path. I wasn't becoming more and more separate from the family, quote unquote, leaving home, but actually showing up in a more caring and respectful way in my relationships there. The second, this was just the first verse. The second part of that verse was, when your parents correct you, listen with patient respect. So, well, that's not easy. So how do you do that? Well, so when she would say, David, what are you going to be doing with your life? You need to go get a job. You need to go get an internship. You can't just go to the monastery. And what kind of future are you trying to create for yourself? And before I would kind of argue back, you know what? Being a monk is actually really a secure job. If you look at it, you're kind of not going to get fired. It's a really good way to live, which it is not very happy.
Right. You went to Stanford.
I mean, yeah. So there was definitely another thing with that about, how to say, what I was going to actually study in college, which at one point I was thinking, if I want to be a monk, maybe I should study like Chinese, which would be very practical for, reading sutras and translation and so on and so forth. My mom's like, what? You're going to Stanford to study Chinese? Now, this is not my expectation here. And so I would say we compromised on physics. So I ended up doing this because it's something that, having grown up in Silicon Valley, physics, just growing up, my father also got a PhD in physics. So it's just part of the family doing science and technology. And at the same time, it wasn't so time consuming as, for instance, doing some of the other majors that probably, if I wasn't interested in Buddhism, I'd end up doing like computer science or electrical engineering. But another part I really liked about physics was that people were very curious on trying to understand things. And that was something I really, the kind of the influence of money and these kind of things weren't so strong there. It was more like people were really curious and discovering things. And definitely money was part of it, in the sense of being able to fund these experiments with a real genuine wish to understand. And so it was a very good physics department. So anyways, so learning how to listen to my mom, when she spoke with me, I would just listen and kind of repeat back what she said to me, empathically, and saying, okay, I really understand you care about me and my future. So what can I do? Okay, maybe I need to get an internship for the summer. Okay, I can look into it. That would, what you feel is important for my life, And so I just try to be much more according. At the same time, in my heart, I still kept that vow of wanting to be a monk. But rather than forcing that on my mom or my parents, in a way, almost like saying, it's my life, get out of my life. It's like, I have this wish, but I also really want to respect and care for the family at the same time, and allow whatever arose to arise out of that space. And so maybe many years later, I actually joined the monastery after I finished college as a lay volunteer. I don't think for sure my parents weren't ready to kind of say, yeah, go forth. And so my excuse was actually working at DRBU. Right. So she could say to her friends, oh, David's working in education.
Okay, Dharma Ram Buddhist University.
Yeah, Dharma Ram Buddhist University, where Ajahn Kovdo is a BA student here now.
That's right.
So
and Jin Chuan Shi is now a
assistant professor and chaplain.
Chaplain.
But so I spent maybe 5 years doing that. And then over time, my mom was more accepting. There was one story that I later found out, actually in the last few years, was that she came up to 16,000 Buddhas, I think, for a session once. and she was staying with some other woman in the dorms. And then the other woman found out who she was. She was my mother. And so she said, "Oh, so you're the reason why David can't leave home." My mother looked up and taken aback. They're like, "Oh, and I haven't really said anything. I just be part of the monastery." But and then she said, every night David's been bowing in the hall after he was going to sleep to Guanyin Bodhisattva, hoping that you'll let him go. And she just started crying. And for her, I think it touched something inside her, realizing how much I really cared about this path. And at the time, I never knew about that. And I didn't really have any much expectations. I would just, at night, just bow because I really enjoyed the final chant. And I'm bound to Guanyin Bodhisattva. But I did have that wish, I really wish to walk this path, and hoping that somehow, it would be possible. And somehow, honestly, now I'm very grateful. My parents are actually both very supportive. I think if I weren't a monk now, my mom would be quite sad, because she just found that it's just a very kind of wholesome way to live, and she's kind of it's part of like a Dharma family,
That's interesting. So I had similar. Well, I mean, not you had much more prolonged relationship with City of 10,000 Buddhas,
Yeah.
but for that little 2-month period when I first met you, I had a pretty profound learning experience about filial piety, or like gratitude to parents as well. At the Boys and Girls School, every month at that time they had like a virtue of the month, and they had like a sign that would say, "This month's virtue is faith." But while I was there, one of the virtues was filial piety. Like, I don't even know, what does that even mean? And but staying there, it just so happened that one of the talks that Master Hua was giving over, in recorded form over the meal, he talked about one of the best ways to. So I started thinking about that gratitude to parents, and then I was like, that's a great idea, but how do I do it? And then I hear Master Hua talk in this recorded talk about the best way to show gratitude to parents is to go forth.
Yeah.
And I was just struck by the profundity of that in his kind of flipping things around. And I'm curious, he was so willing and able to really almost fearless in his Dharma advice. And that might be a nice segue. One thing I'm curious about as you are transitioning into the monastery is this almost fabled 3 months or 90-day.
You mean the ordination kind of training period?
Yes, exactly.
108 days.
Yeah.
So what did happen was I actually got permission from my parents 2010 to begin intervalo, we call it anagarika period, or we call it a trainee period. And so you're a layman, but you actually move into the main monastery and not staying in the lay dorms. You're actually staying with the monks now, and you're keeping the whole schedule, and eating 1 meal a day, wearing the kind of the lay robes. For us, it's a black robe and a brown robe, a brown sash, and just kind of being in service in the monastery. And you do that for at least 6 months. And then you can have a period of kind of being a novice monk for at least probably 2 years, And then at the end of that 2 years, we have a 108-day training period before receiving full ordination. What's really kind of wonderful, kind of tradition that Master started here, is that ordination brings together monks from many different traditions. We just had one here, and we had, Ajahn Pasano come, Ajahn Kunadamo come, Ajahn Yanako come, even Ajahn Chunda came. We have Sri Lankan Bhantes like Bhante Piyananda, Bhante Shila Wimala. We have one Korean monk, Venerable Jin Wo, and also the monks from our tradition. And I think the total number of precept years among the preceptors was like 440 plus years.
Wow.
And it's inspiring just to see all those senior monks together and carrying on the Sangha, and knowing that when I leave home, there's connections with all these virtuous teachers. and that was something I really, I didn't, now being here and kind of being in the Sangha, just to feel like I have a very deep kind of sense of respect and friendship with the Thai forest, because they're actually part of the ordination process. And it's been that way for many, many years.
Is it true that Ajahn Sumedho was actually the preceptor
of
the current abbot?
Yeah, the current abbot of Siddhartha Buddhas. What happened was, I think it was maybe like late 1980s, and Ajahn Sumedho and Master Hua were very good friends. And so he invited Ajahn Sumedho to come and help be certifying Acharya. So essentially, you have the main monk, who's the preceptor, who has the main role. Then you have the confessor Acharya, and then the teaching Acharya. And the rest is kind of certifying Acharyas in our tradition, at least 7 more. And so the certifying Acharyas have not such a kind of key role. They kind of are there and to confirm, yes, we agree to this. The preceptor is kind of the main person, which is the same in the Theravada. Mm-hmm. So usually Master Hua plays that role. But at that time, he was ill. And so I think Ajahn Sumedho got a call and a message basically saying, I'm not feeling well. Could you be the preceptor? Which is, like a big, like, wow, okay. And Ajahn Sumedho, graciously accepted. And at that time, the current abbot of Siddhartha Buddhas was actually receiving ordination. And so, Ajahn Sumedho was his preceptor. So not a small thing. But maybe just to go over the actual training process. So I think that first year as an anagarika or trainee is really about service. And then as a novice monk, we essentially still service is primary, but you start to really study the Shami Vinaya. And novice. Novice. Yeah, Shami is novice. And which is the 10 precepts. And we have a little booklet that we try to memorize that kind of explains to us the novice precepts, but also in the Theravada, they call it the Korwat, right? The kind of monastic etiquette. So how do you treat your teacher? How do you have your meal? How do you sit in chan together? Basically very simple activities we do through the monastery, but there's a way to do it that allows for community harmony. And so that becomes the focus, is learning how to begin to be a monk. And then it culminates with a 108-day training period where there's a real focus on learning the Bhikshu precepts and also the Brahmanet Sutra. So the Brahmanet Sutra is the Bodhisattva precepts. And they say 10 major and 48 minor precepts, so another 58 precepts that are, and I can go into that more later if you wish, but it kind of are kind of vows that you take. So the Bhikshu precepts are vows you take for this life. The Bodhisattva precepts are actually vows that you take for this life all the way to Buddhahood.
Wow, and had you already taken those?
No, I actually have taken the lay Bodhisattva precepts. There's another set that are for lay people to take. And we do that transmission maybe every like 3 or 5 years at the Siddhartha Buddhas.
And is that 16 or something?
It's a 6 major and I think 26 minor.
Okay.
And when you look at them, actually, for instance, filiality is a major part of the Bodhisattva precepts and a real spirit of that. So one of the main themes is, because as all beings have been our parents, if you really look at from a kind of a Buddhist vision of how samsara works and how relationships work, we have a very profound relationship with all living beings. So if we just take that as a ground, then how do we show the care that we would show our parents from this place of filiality and respect?
Okay.
And then that becomes the foundation for the whole path. So it's interesting in terms of that context. But we're going back. So that's one piece, is learning those precepts. And another really important part is learning kind of about the 53 small mantras and verses. And these are kind of verses we take throughout the day. Like when we wake up in the morning, we recite a simple verse about waking up and hoping all living beings will develop this kind of awareness and kind of understand things as they are, you say. And then, as we use the bathroom, there's like a verse for not just the letting go of, excrement and whatever we have in our bodies, but also letting go of defilements and for all living beings. So there's these kind of verses in the tradition that actually come from the Avatamsaka Sutra,
Right.
the Purifying Practices chapter, where we take the mindfulness of just going through our daily lives and add on another kind of, I would say maybe a loving kindness or a karuna or a compassionate wish for all beings. So that's another important part of the training, is doing that. So there's definitely a kind of real vigor for all those years.
Are those classes? So let me just add up the years. So you've
Yeah.
got 1 year as a postulant, the black
6
robe.
months, at least 6
6
months.
months. Okay.
Yeah, but you're a layperson in the monastery for at least 6 months before that too.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then after that, you can take, if the monastics allow you, you can take the Shami ordination.
Yeah.
Which is anywhere from
2 years to 5 years,
to
6
5
years,
years.
because our ordination, since it's such a large ceremony, isn't done every year.
Right.
So it really depends on when there's a cohort who are going to be ordained.
Okay. And then, so 2 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And then after that, you've got this 108-day real kind of.
Yeah, a little bit
push.
like kind of like.
Yeah, not a hazing, but.
Yeah, it's not hazing, but there's definitely a sense of vigor. Like you really put your heart into it. There's a real emphasis on kind of repentance and renewal. Like we're going forward and we're requesting the precepts, and this is very precious.
Lots of bowing.
At least 2 hours.
2 hours of bowing.
Yeah. Even as Shami, we have to start doing that.
With the universal bowing?
Universal bowing or a great compassion repentance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then throughout the day, is there a standard, like is every day the same? You wake up at a certain time?
Yeah, we wake up like at a little bit before 3:30.
Okay.
And the novices hit the boards and offer the water and incense for the various shrines in the monastery. And then we line up to morning ceremony, which starts about 4 a.m. And then, then we have universal bowing, which is a very slow kind of alternate bowing in the Buddha hall. It's very beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful tune in that it actually really calms the heart. And I really like the final repentance verse. To me, it's
Right.
such a kind of poignant and moving tune as you kind of go through. It's actually in the verse, it goes through all the most horrible things that human beings can do, like
Right.
destroying the Sangha and shedding the
Buddha.
Yeah, shedding the Buddha's blood,
Right.
killing our parents.
Right.
But to me, what it's basically doing is actually saying, even these things that are so horrible, we can repent and let go of. Because at the end it says, may I return back to my inherent nature, which is fundamentally pure. Let the triple jewels light shine on me and kind of open up that place.
Yeah, I remember that contrast when I was there. I loved it. But as you say, like the first part is so graceful, so beautiful. You've got this Bhikshuni nun, and she's just singing so beautifully and bowing for 50 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it goes into this verse about like how I've killed my
parents
for multiple lives.
Yeah. It's
but I enjoyed it as well.
Yeah,
I'll see if I can put a link to it.
Yeah, you can hear it. It's just the tune is amazing. We just need to find the liturgy to fit in the West. How do we kind of express that in English? Because there's something, it probably needs maybe different words, maybe a different tune, but there's a flavor there that when you feel it, it's almost like you're cleaning up inside.
It's
really healing. It's sobering and it's very healing. And so that's a lot of what we're trying to do as we're starting out on this path. Is the teaching for us is to actually receive the precepts. We first have to kind of purify and let go of the things that we've done that might have been harmful. So then when we go and receive the precepts, we can be a kind of a pure vessel to uphold them. And so that becomes a real focus, is this kind of repentance and renewal, learning these verses, and also learning the precepts and seeing how we live that in our kind of everyday lives. And a lot of them are classes. So the monks would do classes with us on the Bodhisattva precepts and the Bhikshu precepts and so forth.
And this would be the first time that you've actually seen the details of the precepts.
For the Bhikshu precepts.
For the Bhikshu precepts.
Bhikshu precepts.
Yeah.
So, so what happens in the Chinese tradition, which is interesting, is that they don't really recommend lay people to study the Bhikshu precepts until you're really seriously going to take them. So, yeah.
Well, I think we're going to open up to questions
Yeah.
in just a bit, but gosh, we haven't even gotten to when you ordained as a bhikshu yet. But maybe before we go to questions, just one last question is what you're describing with the daily schedule. And I think we've spoken about this before, is that, also Westerners have all sorts of fantasies about what it's like to be a monk. But I think you've described to me one of the major aspects, and what I've observed as well, is that at City of 10,000 Buddhas, one of the major aspects is just following all the ceremonies, just coming to everything. And you've got the whole day is sprinkled with various ceremonies. People, all the bhikshus, everyone coming together to do these ceremonies. Altogether, what is it, like 5+ hours per day?
I think more. So starting 4 to 5 morning ceremony, 5 to 6 universal bowing. Then you have a little bit of a break, and some people will meditate. 7 to 8, we have Avatamsaka Sutra recitation. Then you work together. Then 10:30, we have a meal offering ceremony for about 15-20 minutes. You have your meal, then you finish with another chant for like maybe 10 minutes. So it's another 30 minutes. So it's like 3.5 hours. Then you have the Great Compassion Repentance at 12:30. Well, now it's 1, but then it's 12:30. And so you have basically 30 minutes, but not really to walk back and then walk to the Buddha Hall. So you have maybe like 15 minutes of just time to just like take a breath. An hour and a half, so it's 4.5 hours.
Okay.
Then you go back, do some work, and then you have some meditation together. And then you have evening ceremony for an hour, 6:30 to 7:30. So that's now 5.5 hours. Then we have evening lecture in the hall for another hour and a half. So if you want kind of the ceremony, then 7 hours.
Okay.
And then you have another 30-minute final recitation of the heart of the Shrangva mantra, which is about 25 minutes.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
So it's like almost 7.5 hours every day, every single day, except the weekends, which you add another 4 hours of ceremony. So during the work period, you have 2 more hours of Shrangva mantra recitation. And in the afternoon, you have 2 hours of Great Compassion mantra recitation. Yeah. So this is,
so when you do that, when you got all this scrubbing going on every day, then after 7 years, bing, you've got.
Well, it's actually really good for building mindfulness. At the same time, because of my reflection that I've had over these years, is that it's actually quite difficult, especially for maybe say us coming grown. I share that with the Biography monks, and they're like a little bit in shock,
right?
Because you have the whole afternoon free, oftentimes,
right? And they think waiting 2 years to get into robes is a long
time. Yeah. And my sense is a place we can really learn from the Theravadas, having a balance of community practice and solitude. So our tradition has so much emphasis on community practice, and also I think it's the kind of the reality of China. If you go to these monasteries, there are like maybe thousands of monks practicing together. And so just to organize everyone and to kind of keep the monastery together, you just line the monks up and they just do the ceremonies and do the practices. Whereas I think in the Thai forest, there's a lot more space. You have a kuti, imagine you have 1,000 kutis, how much space you need to actually host all these monks. So
it's going to be a big monastery.
Big monastery. Yeah, this is a spirit. For instance, the Chan sessions in China, what happens is the monks just live in the meditation hall.
Right.
And so you imagine you have a meditation bench, like maybe say in a square, and the monks sit on the bench and they do walking meditation, circling this center. And where's their beds? Where do they rest? Right behind their Chan bench. So they have a curtain.
So is it about as big as this? Kind of.
Yeah. So they just have a little spot like this big, and then a little place to put their stuff, and they just rest there, and then they get up and they walk.
They're doing walking meditation around their bed?
Not around the bed, around the Chan hall. Okay. So imagine their beds here. Yeah. There's a Chan bench here, so they just sit on the Chan bench, and when it comes to walk, they just walk here. Okay. And they just actually stay in the Chan hall. They don't leave except for meals. Yeah. That's it.
All right.
So you're with other people all the time.
Yeah. Intense.
Yeah, it's intense.
Intense. Yeah. Well, let's get to some questions. So we've got, this is Ajahn Nisbo's here. He says, hello.
Hello, Venerable.
Jin Chuan Shi, it's great to have you. Beautiful conversation. Come and visit us in Seattle
Yes,
soon.
yes.
Yeah, good. Right. Next question is, hello, what do you feel is the role of a monastic so far as their effect on people of the world? Do monks or nuns go out and help others outside of teaching meditation and study? Great question.
So I think the question is, so how do monastics kind of support people in society?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do monks do for the world?
I think for me, at least what really inspired me about monasticism was a monk named Thomas Merton. And I don't know if this is Dave Stokes. Yeah. I don't know if you know what Thomas Merton is, but he's a very kind of well-known American Trappist monk. Oh, he's not American, but he lived a long time in America. And he wrote a lot during the kind of civil rights movement and these various things. And I found the ways that he wrote was very penetrating and kind of illuminating, talking about these deeper values of life. And so my sense is the monastics play a role is that they show a way of life that is kind of a whole different set of values than what often we have in society, which is often trying to accumulate material wealth or say certain kind of power or reputation, fame, and to say actually these monks who have almost nothing based on those kind of standards. I mean, in most ideal sense, of course, monastics, we also, get our own attachments over time. But in the spirit of what the Buddha set out, the life of simplicity, we're just supposed to be satisfied with whatever food we receive on alms, the robes that we have, could be rags, we live under a tree, and our medicine is his cow urine, right? That's what we're supposed to be satisfied with. And that we can be joyful with that. So somebody in society realizes, you know what? Maybe I don't need so much. There's a way we can live in this world that doesn't need to take up so many resources. And I can just be content. So on one level, to me, it's the monastics kind of hold a space in our society's consciousness that you can be happy with almost nothing.
Being an example.
Being an example in that. On top of that, and that's why I think we're at Dharma Run Buddhist University, is a little bit different than maybe 1,000 years ago, where it was maybe more agrarian society. Now, in general, people have a lot more education. And so the conversations that are happening now around, say, technology, that we have this artificial intelligence is happening, for instance, there's going to be I'm going to go to Europe pretty soon with Jin Shi, and we're planning to have I'm not definitely an expert at all in this, but he has a friend who's like an expert in quantum physics. He's actually building quantum computers. And another friend does Yogacara, which is this kind of Buddhist philosophical system. And then so Jin Shi and myself are there not so much to talk about those systems, but to share how can we actually embody the values that that we might be learning from these deeper ways of seeing the world, in our everyday life. And so to me, that monastics are part of that conversation that are kind of setting the direction of our humanity. We're part of the story, kind of helping weave the story of how we're together. In terms of university, it's kind of part of that dialogue. And of course, there's many other areas. At least in our tradition, we have K through 12 schools. So having children come to the monastery and giving them a safe place to learn and chance to learn about, let's say, filiality, gratitude to parents, and how to live a good life.
And this is specifically about monks and nuns, but that's a unique thing at City of 10,000 Buddhas. You actually do have monks and nuns.
Yeah, we have a lot of nuns. Actually.
Elementary school teachers.
Yeah, we have elementary school teachers and high school teachers and
university teachers.
Universities. And the principal of our girls' school right now is Jin Chuan Shi.
Yeah.
Who's
she's great. I'd love to have her as my principal.
Dharma Master Jin Shi. Yeah, she's very fun. And so we're pretty active. The other area is translation. I think for us is kind of bridging various cultures and generations, and then service. It's not something we're so strong in right now, but I think it's definitely something that we can grow in. And but I see in the Christian tradition is very well developed, is this sense of feeding those who don't have that much. And I think Bhikkhu Bodhi is really kind of leading that charge. I'm going to say charge. I'll say that service with a heart of care based on Buddhist values. I have the opportunity to actually work with him in BGR, and I'm Buddhist Global Relief, and I'm just really inspired by his humility and care for, all living beings, especially those who are suffering. So he says, we can't just sit on our cushions. We actually have to take that care and bring it out into the world.
Right. He had an interesting phrase. He talks about, and this is not exactly like this, but he talks about the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah.
And the first truth of dukkha having like I believe it's a vertical dimension. So that's like, our own personal dukkha. But he also talks about this lateral, I think it is, or horizontal dimension of dukkha as well. So, there, in his mind, there is this, he's just pointing out that there is this broader dukkha, the dukkha of society, the suffering of not just us, but other people. I appreciated that. So great question. And one other thing you do, in addition to, the teaching and service and being an example, is creating a home. We got, I think, quite a few more questions, but I'd love for you to get back to the Redwood Vihara, which is a new training monastery for people interested in taking robes in this tradition, to do more of that, to create another generation of people to do this. Okay. Dear Bhantes, if a Theravada practitioner plans to visit a Mahayana temple regularly, is she expected to chant the Bodhisattva vows and sutras along with everyone else? If he or she is not committed to the Bodhisattva path, but to the Arhat one, is there a contradiction in this? If yes, how to suppress it?
Surpass it, or maybe how to maybe say work with this. I would say, at least in our monasteries, there's definitely not, I would say, a pressure that you have to chant along. But it is built into our ceremonies where we recite the Bodhisattva vows. So for instance, the standard ones are living beings are infinite. I vow to save them all. Afflictions are boundless. I vow to be freed of them, all of them. And the Dharma methods for awakening are, measureless. I vow to learn them all. And the Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to realize it. But so it's built into our ceremonies. And I remember the Biogiri monks actually came and stayed when there was the fires. What was maybe like 2017. So 5-6 years ago, and they came and joined our ceremonies. I'm not sure what each person did, but I did spend some time going over the ceremonies with them because they were quite curious. And the sense was, we really want to respect everyone's own aspirations. And that was actually something very important for Master Hua, was supporting each person's spiritual aspirations in their own context, and not kind of saying, this is the right way and everyone has to fit into it, which sometimes religion can do, is we can kind of become very narrow and kind of fixate on our point of view, thinking that since we really like it and everyone else is supposed to like it too. And it creates a kind of tightness and almost competitiveness.
We have this term we use sometimes, is the narcissism of small differences. I think it's a Freudian term, but it's like, we're both Buddhists, we're both monks. But there does become this kind of like looking at the tiniest little differences. Like, you've got a clip there. And I don't have a clip. And
you get to roll up your robe.
I roll up my robes. But somebody might say, but those are small things. What about like, taking on vows?
Shared precepts. And so I think the way I would work with it, if you're coming to a monastery, it depends on where you are, because every monastery a little bit holds it differently. Kind of monastic etiquette. Because I'm in the university, I'm very aware that sometimes students who come are not even Buddhist, to try to make space as if you're not I don't even sure the word's not Buddhist, because I could even make them feel separate. Just to say, anyone who's not comfortable, doing this gesture or reciting this, you can just listen. That's perfectly acceptable, and really respect you for whatever you feel authentic for your own, from your own heart. And in my sense, that's perfectly fine. If you're going to a place and you want to stay true to what you feel resonates inside, then you just do whatever you're comfortable with, and you can listen to other people and just rejoice in their aspirations.
Yeah. And that's been my experience, being at City of 10,000 Buddhas these last 3 years plus, is I never feel compelled, and just keep my vows and fit in where I can. So what are the connections between Thai forest tradition and Dharma realm's monastic tradition that allows for the fellowship that exists between the two? I guess that's us.
Yes, us.
Yeah, or the whole traditions.
What tradition?
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that one, or me too, or?
I'll just touch on it briefly, and I'd love any other angles. But Master Hua is the reason that Abhayagiri is where it is. Master Hua offered the land to Lumpur Sumedho, and Lumpur Sumedho then gave it to Ajahn Amaro and Lumpur Pasano to start. So Abhayagiri is just about a 25-minute drive up the road. So there's been this connection from the start. Ajahn Amaro, and as Dharma Master Jin Chuan was saying, Master Hua has actually, I think, said that he and Lumpur Sumedho have not only been friends, were not only friends for a long time this life, but in previous lives as well. They were practitioners together. So that's that historical element. And then Ajahn Amaro also had a big affinity with this tradition. He met Master Hua, I'm not sure what, probably early 80s for the first time, but has had very serious practices of cultivating compassion. I know he chanted one of the hearts of the Shurangama mantra 108 times every day for several years. He did a not lying down practice inspired by Master Hua for several years. And just coming. And then I myself, came to CTTB before I went to Abhayagiri. They are close, and we kind of see each other. We used to have these monastic gatherings with all the West would come together. So and we see each other pretty
regularly. No, it's a really deep friendship, and I just feel honored to be able to call these, Dharma brothers, and kind of Dharma brothers or noble friends. Definitely gives me a lot of inspiration. And actually doing the 108, actually the whole novice time and 108-day training period, I was listening to Ajahn Amaro's teachings that really helped me digest this whole process of training, because he kind of explains it in a way that makes sense to myself. I kind of grew up here in a kind of a Western education, and of course there's the wonderful kind of structures that we have in the Chinese tradition, but sometimes they're not really explained, and you're just kind of expected just to go through them. And so having Ajahn Amaro kind of really unpack what it means to be a monk was like, with this kind of very relaxed and happy kind of tone, that makes a big difference.
Well, I think we might only have time for one more question. Let's see if we have a short one. Did the Buddha say that all people will be liberated eventually?
The Buddhists say all people will be liberated eventually. And I would say maybe one place that we might see that kind of teaching is in the Lotus Sutra, where it says kind of all living beings have this potential to realize full awakening, and it's just kind of a matter of time.
So they have the potential.
Yeah.
In the Theravada context, there's a statement that the Buddha is asked that question in Theravada Sutta, and I think he kind of takes a sidestep and says, anyone who will be liberated by following this path. It's the Eightfold Path. So it doesn't specifically address in either one.
It's there's different frameworks, and the Lotus Sutra definitely has a kind of a vision where all beings have this potential, and that the Buddha is here to show them that potential and give them the confidence in that potential so they actually can realize that potential.
Well, Dharma Master, thank you so much for coming. This is
delight to be here.
The time just flies. At this rate, we might have to have a couple dozen more episodes to bring us up to the present. But yeah, thank you for joining in, and people are welcome to come to our Zoom room. I'll put the link in the chat, and our Zoom occasions are times when we can come in and just have a dialogue rather than just